Hello, everybody, and welcome to Coffee Class with Young Screenwriters. We are an online resourcing community for upcoming screenwriters, and today we are going to break down the pilot episode of MARE of EASTTOWN, which is a very good drama, mystery, intense series on HBO, right?
Yep.
And we have Avi with us. We're
Hello.
thrilled about. Thank you for coming on, Avi.
Thank you for having me.
Dreams
So,
do come true.
so yeah, we've all, I think, watched different amounts of the show. Actually, Avi, have you finished the whole season?
I have seen the whole season, yeah.
Okay, me too. And then Adam is on episode 2.5.
I do know basically how it ends, though. Unfortunately, it was spoiled for me. But
No.
I know.
Man,
I'm terrible.
that's a shame.
Half of it's my
Sad.
fault. Somebody was like, who had seen it, was talking to me about it, and I was like, "Oh yeah, just tell me."
Oh no. I feel like you're someone who cares about that stuff.
I don't care about spoilers. I really don't.
I don't care either. But we're going to do our best not to spoil it and just talk about the pilot episode, which it should help that I'm going to try to do a quick breakdown of the pilot episode so we can get oriented about what actually happened in it so we don't go too far. So I'm going to do that real quick.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Let me share my screen. Let me just make sure this is the right one. Yep. That is Discord.
You're sharing Discord.
Wow.
Join the Discord, people.
Alexie is honoring our Young Screenwriters tradition of technical difficulties in the first 10 minutes. Yeah. That's,
Indeed.
The
I
original
love me some
incarnation of this
technical.
show.
No, it's never
technical
happened.
difficult.
We've never had a single coffee class without a technical problem of some kind.
The original incarnation of the show was called Please Stand By.
In the first ever coffee class, my dog barked really loud and terrified everyone. And everyone was left scarred. Some of those people have never come back.
Bring back the dog, Alexie.
I never saw it, so.
Well, good. It was a solid first attempt. So, if you have been checking out us recently breaking down pilots, you know that we've been kind of playing with the form and like looking at a different way to break them down and try and build out a tentpole document, kind of like what we have for features that covers all of the story beats. And this is sort of an organic process where we're figuring this out together with John, trying to find something that really like bridges. There's a lot of different kinds of shows out there and like structures for shows, and like some are half hour, some are hour. There's a lot more versatility than what you would normally get in a feature. So we're trying to figure out a form that can really represent all of that. So I tried something a little bit different here that actually looks a little bit closer, slightly, to what we'd be familiar with for a feature tentpole. But I'm just going to run through it really quick. It's a pretty loose summary. So, MARE of EASTTOWN, our protagonist is Mare Sheehan. She's in her 40s. She's a detective in Easttown, Pennsylvania. And we learned pretty quickly that she failed to solve a really big missing persons case for a girl named Katie last year. We also know she's Lady Hawk. She's a local basketball celebrity. She's been in this town her whole life. Everyone knows everyone. And in that opening scene, we see her getting called to a woman's house, Mrs. Carroll, and she tells her, "I'm a detective, Mrs. Carroll. I'm a detective sergeant, which means I investigate the burglaries and the overdoses and all the really bad crap that goes on around here," which really orients us as to who this character is. She's pretty blunt and just, just kind of steamrolls through situations in a really amazing way. And also Kate Winslet is incredible, which I am sure we will talk about a lot because it's just true. So the flaw is something that comes up later, actually, in the we get it more vocalized later. But she tells Richard, the guy that she hooks up with near the end, when he's asking about her, like if they can see each other again, she says, "My life's complicated." And in my mind, this is really representative of her flaw, because yeah, her life is kind of complicated, but it's also complicated, at least as far as we know, in a way that's like shouldn't prevent her from having a life at all. So she has something going on in this regard, either like really poor self-image or guilt of something. And we get the impression that it's related to her son, Kevin, who we infer has died. So as the opposite side of this, we get the sense that her inner need is going to be some sort of probably peace with herself. But again, this is the first episode, so it's sort of unclear exactly what that is going to mean for this character. Her ordinary world is that she's living back home with her mom, who's moved back in, her daughter, Siobhan, the grandson, Drew, who we learn is her son's kid, and that her ex-husband and his new fiance live right down the street, and that basically her whole life situation is people coming to her to solve their problems and not appreciating her, and her just kind of bouncing from issue to issue. And the setup for the episode, in my opinion, which I'm curious if Adam and Avi agree, is that she has to go to this big Lady Hawk ceremony, where she was the basketball star. Mrs. Carroll and Mr. Carroll in the beginning tell her like about this ceremony, and she claims she's not going to go, but that's where she's driving towards for this episode loosely. And I would say that this is actually like a pretty loose objective. She's just we're meeting her really in this pilot, more so than in some other pilots that I've seen. Like, we're really just getting a sense of what her ordinary world is, like the kind of things she deals with on a daily basis, and really treating Easttown as a character in a lot of ways. And we're seeing a bunch of different facets of it. So in between her hearing about the ceremony and her getting there, there's a bunch of obstacles that come up that show us her ordinary life. She's getting her grandson a turtle tank. She has to track down a local opioid addict, Freddie, who burglarized the house. She ends up hurting her ankle because she's going at it alone. We learned that the mother of the girl who went missing is nagging her about finding her daughter, which it's clear that this is a cold case at this point. She learns that her ex-husband is now engaged, and he's also acting like a better guy, which, everybody is it just feels like everyone is kind of not valuing her. And she's bickering with her daughter, and we get the sense that she's putting way too much on this kid. Like, the kid is watching the grandson a lot, to the point where before it was revealed that it was her son's kid, I was like, is this her daughter's kid? And it was not. Then she meets up with her friend Lori to go to the game. At the game, there's the unexpected consequences. She ends up running into Dawn, who's the mom of the girl who went missing, and she confronts MARE at the basketball game. This is big drama. And then the payoff in this case is that she ends up going to a bar after and meeting Richard, who is a new guy in her life. And again, this is all really the first act of the season. So all of this stuff is just sort of before the inciting incident, which happened at the very end. We get the season objective and the hook for the rest of the series, which is she's going to have to solve Aaron's murder. And now in this new world, her town doesn't just have like the fluke of one young woman dying. It now has 2 women who have gone missing or died. So that's her new world. And then there's a lot of little subplots running on in this, but I think that one of the only ones that I feel like was really, really defined well in this pilot, like wasn't just a complete setup for later, was the B story with Aaron, who is the teen mom who ends up dead at the beginning of the first episode. And we see that she like has a lot of instability in her life. Her objective is to try to get her son ear surgery, but no one is supporting her at all. She's completely on her own. Her setup is that she's going to go on a date with some guy she's never met in Sharp Woods. But when she gets there, it turns out it was a catfish. She's beat up by her ex's new girlfriend. And then, second to last shot of the episode, we see that she is dead in the creek. That is my breakdown.
All right, great job, Alexie.
Thank you.
Very good way of streamlining it all.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there's a benefit to separating the A plot and B plot for clarity. I do also think there's a benefit for seeing how pacing and interweaving them, and I feel like maybe like depends on the show, depends on the episode to like best understand how the story works. For me, I would say I think the episode inciting incident though is when her boss tells her to go back on the cold case.
You're probably right. Yeah. I guess I missed. Yeah, you're right.
It felt very clear that like, no. First of all, I think everybody else is clear too, but like it was very clear, like we got a sense of like what her everyday life was. Although we don't understand her flaw, you're right, like until like a little bit, like we don't have information about how she's sort of repressing her son's death and all of that stuff and her relationships and how she's stuck in the past, all that stuff. But we do get a sense of, she's stuck in her life and she wants to get out of that kitchen and not be like answering these phone calls, like that first scene where we meet her and she's answering that call. Like I love that as establishing, like we get a sense of so much even with very little information about like how she solves problems, what she cares about, what she wants to get out of.
Actually, I would love to pull up the script for that because there was some really great moments in it. Avi, I know you looked at the script too.
Yeah, I watched the season a few weeks ago, and I just read the script now, and I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff that we can glean from it.
There's also
For example,
some like
that title page.
Let's go back to that title.
Oh, all this?
Look at all of those drafts, baby.
This went through revisions.
That's screenwriting.
Revisions. That's over a year of revisions. Do you see that? Started in September 2019. Didn't get to this one until more than a year later.
Yeah. And this draft is like 80 pages, and so many of those pages are just swapped in new versions of scenes. I'm so curious what it used to look like and what spurred those changes, but that's just the process.
So something a little like hint for scripts is, in case this wasn't obvious, these asterisks on the side show what was changed in this draft, I believe. So as you scroll through, you can see the kind of work they did. It's only really a few sections, but they're pretty extensive. So there was a lot of stuff changing up until the very last minute with this script, which I think is just good to know that you're not meant to get it perfect the first time through. And even if you did, people would probably want to change it anyway. Is that me being cynical?
To do my one reference for the episode, I remember watching in the making of Lord of the Rings where they were saying like some of the actors wouldn't even read drafts when they got them underneath the door because they knew they'd get more before they'd wake up. Like they were sneaking different new lines underneath the door while they were sleeping. I'm like, like that happens on movies,
Gosh, no. But I wanted to show this because, first off, this is very atypical.
Very.
Kind of
look
ugly.
at this scene description. Wow. I might actually read it, even though it's going to take me a year and a half. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. Mayor Sheehan, 43, tall and lean with short brown hair and not a trace of makeup, stands outside the wreath-adorned front door of a modest split-level home. She wears a quilted barn jacket over a flannel button-down, Levi's ASIC gels. Clipped onto her belt is a gold Easttown Township detective badge and a holstered S&W M&P Shield 9mm. I don't think I said any of that right. All right. She is a woman that still bears the imprint of her parents, devout working class Irish Catholics who taught her the value of hard work and the futility of complaining, and that life is hard and all there is to do is to grin and bear it. It's an education that has served her well in her career, but left her hamstrung and unextraordinary as a mother.
I love it, and I would. You've got something to say, don't you, Alexie?
I have something to say.
I would say don't do this in a spec, is what I would say. But
that was for Kate. Right. That was for Kate Winslet right there.
Yeah, it was.
What's funny is it has a couple. This happens a couple of times through the script, and the first time you read it, you really kind of reel and say like, "Wow, we are getting a lot of information about these characters that we would not know from watching the show." But there comes a point where you realize there's like 50 characters in this episode, and I remember each and every single one of them distinctly because I'm given a sense of who they are, what makes them distinct. And if you watch the show, they managed to kind of bring that through. Like that distinctness comes through, where somehow this worked.
Yeah,
it's a reminder that this is a blueprint to make the thing, and whatever helps that happen, all that matters is what ends up what the editors are dealing with,
If it's great, you can do anything. If you're great at it, you can do anything.
Yeah,
and he's great at it.
The answer is, if someone says, "Can I break the rules?" the answer is, if you do it well. And that is a very unhelpful answer. But I would think that you're right, that this was written for Kate Winslet. I wonder if this was at all this length in early drafts, or if it became more and more like, we want Kate to read this and want to play this part, so I'm gonna make this into 2 full paragraphs of interesting character stuff.
Well, I know a lot of actors who are like established, when they get a script, their immediate thoughts are, is this a good role for me?
Yeah.
And will I sink my teeth into it? Like, not everybody, but like, what's her name? Helen Mirren is on the record for saying she doesn't read a script until she looks at the end of the script to see how her character ends up. Mm-hmm. And if she doesn't like that, she doesn't read it.
I have a theory. Because I know that this writer has had successes before and was always going to get read by HBO and was always in a position to get something made. But I suspect that of the many revisions the script went through, the character descriptions were not one of them. In part because there's no asterisk next to any of them.
Right. Yeah, I was about to say it's the only thing that didn't change.
But also because this is core idea stuff. It doesn't strike me as something that evolved over the course of the story as they went back and made changes to the execution of things. Maybe they had access to some locations and not others. They had to rewrite a sequence. Maybe they lost an actor for a day and they had to rewrite a scene. But the character descriptions feel so core to the story and to the story being told. I suspect that was always there. And I think that this writer, whose name I'm not going to attempt to say off the top of my head because I can't check in the next tab, but I suspect that he knew that
Brad
ultimately...
Inglesby.
Okay. I suspect that Brad Inglesby knew that no matter what, in order for this show to get made, it was going to have to get sent out to Kate Winslet. I think he knew that from the start, and I think that he wrote the character and the character description with that in mind. What does a star want to play? What does a big actor want to sink their teeth into? And here's a character who, so the first paragraph here is physical description. The second paragraph is, here are her core values and where she got it from, as opposed to, she's pretty but doesn't know it. Like it comes down to very specific character stuff that's going to drive everything that she does. If I'm an actor and I'm reading that paragraph, I'm thinking, I can play that, I can live in that character, and I can turn this into something. Like there's a description in this script that I really love, and I wish I remember what page it is. But it's when we first meet Aaron.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you pull that up?
I can find it. Yeah.
Because I really love what he does there. Really just kind of like knocked my socks off when I saw it.
This?
I can't see.
So
yes.
Okay.
Do you want to read it, or should I?
Sure. Is it like the whole opening scene, or is there a particular part that you remember?
Aaron smiles, that paragraph.
Okay. So, Erin smiles anyway as she watches him play, endlessly amazed by this unexpected child that abruptly ended her youth and sent her friends fleeing, yet is her sole reason for living now. And she's a wonderful mother, a testament to how deeply we can love our children without loving ourselves. Ooh.
Right? Okay, so like if I'm an actor who is up for the role of person who dies in the first episode, right? And I'm looking for, is this a character who I feel like I can get invested in? That's what gets me in. It's not the plot function. It's not the you are important to the story going forward. It's that. It's she does not love herself. She has no reason to live except for this child. And she that is right. Like, I just love it so much.
And also, what really works well about this execution wise is that they don't go. It's just one block of information. It's one paragraph, and it's tied to an action. She's watching her son, and it's almost like it's a novelistic idea of like she's watching her son play, and then we get a little bit of her thoughts in the background, and then we go back to dialogue, and we don't overdo it. Like, this doesn't happen again for her, right?
Right, yeah, and I mean, what you're saying makes perfect sense. It's not enough to just have in the description, here's why this character is particularly worth investing your life in, actor. It's also, married to the actions that you give that character and the lines you give that character. Like, what is this character going to do? So the description here is a promise. The promise is this character is worth living a life, through the lens of, but then you have to actually deliver on that promise through the actual scene constructions.
I think it's important to note too that first off, this stuff is new.
Right.
Second, there's a lot of stuff in here that probably I imagine was a little bit made more specific as things went on. Like the fact that it's really giving us camera direction. Like, we're very close on the face of Erin. Reveal now, we see in profile. There's a lot throughout this script of directing the camera.
Yep. And what's funny is if you actually watch the episode, that's not what they do.
Yep.
After reading this script, I watched the first half of the episode again, and we aren't that close on the face of Erin. She's not lying on, with her cheek pressed against the crook of her arm. She's lying on her back. It's a medium shot. And then we just cut to a full wide shot of a baby sitting down. There's no profile. There's none of that. But it doesn't really matter because the essence is there. The essence is we see her and then we see him.
Calling out the specific song that's playing is a really bold move.
HBO money.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's beautiful writing. And I guess to clarify what I meant about the character description, I don't doubt for one moment that description is what the writer intended from day one. Like it's very clear that those descriptions are who the characters are. My thought would be, did he hold back in an earlier draft and then choose to put it in later to try to hook her? Because I think you're absolutely right that the descriptions of the characters could be no other way. Like, if we were going to elaborate on them, they couldn't be anyone else. And their choices mean that they couldn't be anyone else, which is something Cosmo said forever ago, is that characters are their choices.
Yep.
They could be no one else. This was always, at least with this line of action, this has to be who the characters were. I just wonder if stuff was added to appeal to people later, which I guess we won't know unless he decides to talk.
I wonder if he has other scripts for other projects floating around. And I wonder if somebody can do kind of like a case analysis of. He
did that Coach movie with Ben Affleck that came out.
Right, the way back.
Yeah. I haven't seen that, but I know.
I wonder if it's like Coach Affleck. His eyes betray a story of loss and abuse, and like I wonder. I'm curious.
So something that I like about that, I wanted to go back to the beginning real quick, is a writer does write in dialect. It's not like it's not so much that you can't understand what's going on, but that was a choice that was made. Like, instead of go inside and call, they did and apostrophe. They cut off the G's when the people would cut off the G's. Whoever, if it was the writer or someone who helped, they clearly know how people here speak. And I think it enhanced the reading experience and helped us to get a sense of who they are. It is a choice you want to be careful with, though, because you don't want it to feel like you better know how they talk if you're going to write that stuff in, because it's going to be clear if you don't. Then the other thing that I love so much is that we often get these like internal reactions from Mare, like she grins, no shit. And that happens quite a bit, like right before she leaves. Let's see. There.
She said, yeah.
Like things like this. Like telling us the way that she sighs.
I love that because it's actable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, with the dialect, it's a matter of degrees, right? Because the tightrope that he walks so well is he'll leave off the G's and the ing. He'll say yeah instead of you, but he's not going to spell water wooder, you know?
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to spell out the pronunciation of every word. He's just getting kind of the rhythm of it, which I think is important. Where if you lean too hard into it, where you start reading it phonetically, trying to make sure you understand what you are seeing, then that just becomes a big pain.
Well, it helps that the writer is from like central Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Okay, so I'm watching the show, right? Like I read the script, then I start watching the pilot. There's a scene where the deacon, I think it was the deacon, makes a joke at her expense, and in the script, her mom laughs, she glares at her mom, and she gets up and she leaves. In the show, he makes that jab, and she annoyedly sprays cheese whip on some like very local food thing, and somebody along the way with more local knowledge than the writer decided that's a thing that she would do. That just tickles me. Oh, and by the way, okay, so the thing that you said, Alexie, about the inner monologue, sometimes that actually became dialogue in the show. Like, there's that moment where she's on the phone with Frank, and they're talking about the turtle, and she says how last time when they had a lizard 2 weeks later, she had to flush the lizard down the toilet, and Frank says, "Did you really flush the lizard down the toilet?" And in the script, it's just parentheses, "Yes, I did," and she just says something else. In the show, she takes a big bite of a Philly cheesesteak and yells, "Yes, I did."
Yeah.
So in the directing process, I guess, when they were describing what is the motivation for you saying this thing, why, what are you actually trying to convey, every so often an actor will say, "Why don't I just say it?" Like, there's a scene where Erin is talking with her friend about her date, and her friend is all concerned about the location of the date and how, her ex's awful new girlfriend is going to be there. And they added a line in the show that's not in the script, where Erin just says, "Be excited for me. I'm going on a date." And I could just totally imagine that the director sat down with the actors and said, "Erin, throughout this whole scene, what you are saying to her is, be excited for me. I'm going on a date." And she probably just said, "Can I say that?"
Yeah. So here is a question Michelle asked. I saw it now. Did each character have the same amount of description in the script? No. It was definitely like I know that the dad, like Erin's dad, Kenny, had like a sentence or something, basically just saying he's a piece of trash. And like it was sort of reflects how important they're going to be to the story, how much description they get. And then here's another question from Jen. If we write that much character description in a spec, it would be a turnoff, though? That's where the horrible answer is, if you do it well, no, which is not fair. the general answer is don't do that. Like the general answer that you'll get is keep it tight. Don't tell us things we can't see. Like, don't tell us internal character things that we can't see unless it's like really short. Like, you can give us like a little bit of their internal life when you introduce them, but in general, you don't want to like give us their biography. This one goes really in depth for a lot of these characters. So the general answer is keep it shorter than this. Like, only like, honestly, like a sentence or two per character generally. But if you have something really good to say and you do it well, people aren't going to be mad. It's it's a tough one.
Yeah, it's a promise, right? You're making a promise to the reader that that you are on top of things, that you have a control over the story you're telling. And if you deliver a really good character description that has all sorts of unfilmable stuff, but the reader reads it and says, okay, that's consistent and compelling, and I could see what makes this person unique and worth following, you still have to follow up on that promise and make sure that actually comes through in the rest of the story. Otherwise, like if that description of Mare were in a script where she doesn't do anything particularly interesting or compelling, it will just seem like a cheat. Like you're trying to convince us she's more interesting than she is. So if you're going to talk a big game, just make sure you live up to it.
Another thing I'll add, based on this, like my big, I have a theory that a lot of like beginning writers who like the first time you like make a script, like, oh my God, I got words on a page, and this is like, they almost think of them like novels and not like the blueprints that actors interact with and directors interact with. Like, I think a lot of beginning writers, screenwriters, don't actually realize that actors are going to take those words seriously, and really a good actor will analyze this and really take it apart and like look into what you did. And most writers who are starting, it's just like, I just feel like there's definitely a disconnect in terms of realizing like, oh wait, they're going to take your bullshit like 3 a.m. scribblings really seriously, so you better do a good job, you know.
There was a movie I just watched where an aspiring screenwriter is dictating into a tape recorder. It says, fade in, exterior, city, night. The sky is dark like the abyss. Nice. It's raining like drops of poison. Nice. A taxi swerves through the street like a shark through the ocean. Nice. And it's, like where obviously the joke of all that is, what are we actually seeing on the page? If that's a movie, that's just, it's a dark city, there's a taxi, it's raining, but he's so in love with the fact that he has a way with words, you actually have to live up to what you are putting on that page.
Yeah, and
otherwise it's just it's a little like gazing lovingly at yourself in the mirror.
That's exactly it. People fall in love with the sound of their own voice.
Yep. Yeah. I feel like the Breaking Bad pilot walks that line in one of the best ways that I've ever seen. Because again, like, we talk about this quite a bit, but like, you remember the page is a minute of screen time. So when you choose to write 2 full paragraphs of Mare description, like, are we really going to spend that much time with her? I don't think they do, actually, in the final thing. But it's important. It's a good way to keep yourself in, like, to check yourself, is to just generally remember, like, do I really want this shot on Mare to be 30 seconds long? That's a long time in movie land or TV land to just be looking at someone. So that can help. And then also, if every single character was like this in this script, that would be a lot. That would be very draining, and we wouldn't know who to care about,
If the third member of Siobhan's posse gets an entire description about how he got into the weed dispensing business, but kind of talking about length, this script is something like 80 pages to get rid of the index, and of course some of that is just one line on a page of revision that the rest of the page is blank, but it's still on the long side, and they can get away with that because it's the up team production draft. But ultimately, if you're doing a pilot, and you don't have that way in, you turn in a draft that's that long, you're going to get a lot of side eye. And what's funny is even this, which sometimes is cheating for time, like that MARE description is not going to be 30 seconds on the page. It's just going to be a shot. The episode is cut down, and if you've read the script and you watch the episode and you have them kind of side by side, you'll notice they're cherry picking out lines throughout the whole script, anywhere that they can kind of cut something. And you'll notice there's a cut. Sometimes they'll take the line and they'll cut to a reaction shot so that they can lose half of a monologue. And they do that a lot because at some point they looked at their episode and they said, this is too long to air. We have to bring this down. What can we lose? And I feel like if you're in spec land, you have to be doing that, in your own revision process before you send it out to HBO.
And I think some of that could also just be the quality of the acting and directing too. It's like a lesser actor might have needed, or a lesser director might have needed, like, to hit the lines more on the nose. But the performance that they got here was so strong that I could see it, being okay to cut other things because, yeah, we get it, Yeah,
and sometimes it's information, like it's exposition. Sometimes it's just a bit of flourish, like in this script when she's when she's telling character's name escapes me. Don't make us bring in the canine. He's 11 years old. His mind is starting to go. In the script, she goes on further of like, he goes crazy sometimes. I saw him bite a chunk out of somebody's leg. And if you watch the show, there's a cut exactly there. And you can tell that they filmed that and they cut it because 11-year-old dog's mind is starting to go is enough. It gets the point across. Like similarly, like the opening sequence with I think Betty, is that her name?
Betty Carroll.
Woman. Yes.
Yeah.
So in this script, MARE goes to her door. She's knocking on the door. She's yelling loudly. Is somebody going to let me in? A neighbor says, "Oh, she, sometimes she doesn't get her ears, her hearing aids in," and she peeks out Betty peeks out the window and says, "Oh, MARE, is that you?" And MARE looks up and says, "Yeah, it's me." And Betty says, "Okay, I'll come right down. I'll let you in. Kick your shoes off. Don't scuff around." In the episode, it's just knock knock. Betty, are you here? I'm waiting. She looks annoyed. She smokes her vape. Betty leans out the window and says, "MARE, you're here." MARE looks up and says, "I'm here." Cut to mid-conversation when they're already inside.
Mm-hmm.
They realized in the edit while you're reading the script, it doesn't really annoy you. You just sort of notice, like, okay, it's kind of a long, kind of lengthy scene. But they did realize that some lines have more utility than others. And some lines could go.
They didn't exactly get in late, get out early in the draft, actual script. Yeah.
And sometimes you think it does until like you see how it plays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing that's lovely about the script is it's willing to sort of luxuriate in details where characters will say off the cuff things that are just kind of fun, like, "I hate cats, they're disgusting animals, all bones." That's not a functional line, but it's a good line to have because it keeps the character in our head, and there's lines like that throughout that keep details of the town in our head and character in our head. And kind of the price of doing that is sometimes you do a little bit too much, and then you have to pare it back, and that's fine. But that's something to kind of keep an eye out for.
For sure.
It's better than the reverse problem of not having enough good footage. Remember that parody show Garth Marenghi? They have a joke with sort of like, episodes were sometimes running 15 minutes under. So sometimes we just like put slow motion on just to extend the footage.
I've seen shows do that.
Yeah.
So what is, if someone, a screenwriter, reads this script, watches this pilot, what would be something that you would suggest they take away from this and try to incorporate in their own writing, try to do in their own writing? Like, what lesson do you think we can take from this?
For me, was kind of what we talked about before, is sort of like convince the reader that the lead role is a good role. Like especially if it's like a drama around one character, like let people know early, like, it's going to be good. Actor.
Yeah. I have a big thought about this because I've been thinking about it all morning. This is an Act 1, right, of a story. If this were a feature, this would be Act 1, where we are setting up who are the characters, what is their normal world, what is, what would they be doing if not for the inciting incident, what are their relationships, what are their problems. What this tells me is, if you are writing that Act 1, that pre-inciting incident Act 1, you can't just kind of have your characters sit around. And I feel like a lot of new writers do this, where it's like, before the story starts, let's meet the characters, and they're just sort of doing fine. They're just, they're living, they're existing. They have some dialogue where they talk about who they are, where they're from. But what this script does is gives you a reason to believe that this could be a show without the inciting incident. There's just consistent conflict, even if it's low-level conflict. Like, I think that the goal of this episode, the sort of pre-inciting incident goal, and I think that every first act would benefit from making sure that the characters want something before they want the big thing, even if it's not as, even if their initial want isn't as important. I sort of think that Mare's goal in this episode is just to get through her day, and her day just has all of these big annoying things that she has to kind of get through, that are sort of set up at the beginning, and then there are the obstacles that she sees coming and the ones that she doesn't, but ultimately the goal is to get through the day. And the way that the writer makes that compelling is by making sure that there's consistent conflict. There's that one lovely moment where she's taking a breather at home with her mom and the deacon before her Lady Hawk ceremony, and she learns that her ex-husband has gotten engaged to a new woman and is having an engagement party tonight. She learns this, and just as she's learning this and is particularly upset as not having known it after this conflict, the writer ups the conflict by, now the ex walks in, and now they can have a direct conflict. And the script is full of that. Every single scene that made it into the show. There are a couple of scenes that actually, existed only in the script, but they aren't in the show, like the police chief saying, "By the way, remember how earlier in the script I told you got to get back on that old case? You should get back on that old case." They cut that scene. But almost every other scene, there is, the characters want something, and they have to overcome an obstacle, and they have to deal with conflict. So the big takeaway that I would have for writers is, make sure that your setup isn't just table setting. Make sure that there is still story and conflict and goals even before the story actually kicks in.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. To say something different, something that I love about this that was not already mentioned is, first off, I really like the way that the character reactions were inserted into the scene, like into the act, like into the description, to give us more of like what they're thinking. And occasionally there was like a parenthetical that would have normally been like a delivery, like, I guess it is delivery, but like it gives us their internal thoughts that affect the delivery. And it's always very short. Like, it doesn't ramble on and on and on. It's not like we get like their full internal conversation about it. It just gives us enough that we're like, okay, I know how she said this. Like when this is so good. Betty says, "Oh, you're here." And then she grins, "Oh shit." And she says, "I'm here." We get it. And like, that tells us so much about who she is as a character really early. And I just think that stuff like that is really, really great. And that's a really concise way to get it on the page. So that's something I would take from it. And then just honestly, the dialogue in general, it's all stuff that you could cover up and still know which one's Mare.
Yeah. What I really love? Oh, yeah.
No, go ahead.
What something I really loved about the show, kind of riffing on that, about how each character without having to be told which character is saying what. We talked earlier about how the script gives a lot of information in its description that you wouldn't necessarily be able to know while watching the show. Conversely, it withholds so much information, I think, in a really wonderful way, where you kind of have to keep up. You have to be really watching the show to pick up on the information. Like, for example, you don't realize for certain by the end of this episode that Mare has a dead son. right? Where you know that she has a grandson. You know that she has a daughter who is 18, who is probably not the mother of this grandson. And there is a beat. We know that Mare takes care of this grandson, who seems to not have devoted parents besides her, kind of floating around. And then at the end, we know that that Mare has some sort of affection for the absent father, because the kid says, "I want to name the turtle Kevin after my dad. Did he have a favorite animal?" And Mare actually has an answer for that. So you start picking up clues from the situation and from what the characters say and do that aren't just, so, I have to take care of my grandson now that my son's not around. It's all through context, and that's part of how they really keep you reading. They keep you reading, they keep you watching, because they are controlling these questions and the delivery of the answers, where you are kind of learning through osmosis the situation of the story. It happens throughout.
It's kind of like it almost feels like a confidence thing. Like, it's like the writer is like, you know what? No, I'll get to it. Like, I don't need to tell you right now. We'll get there. Just like go along for the ride for a little bit. And there's like this really nice line here. This is the kind of stuff that I think is completely safe to replicate in your own spec script, even though it is kind of breaking the rules in some way. When she's sitting with Drew and he's asking about Kevin, saying like, did my dad like turtles too? And it's all in past tense that give us the vibe that something's off, but we don't know what. It says, but Mare continues running her fingers through his hair, pretending, if only for a few moments, that it's her son. And that's a really great little bit of like internal stuff that doesn't take up that much on the page, but does a lot of work.
Yeah. If you can convince the reader that the missing information isn't because you delivered the information badly, if you can convince them that that information is being withheld deliberately, and you are confident in the way you're describing, that that really helps the reader trust you more, because any read is essentially a trust fall. Will the writer of this take care of me? I'm going to put some time into actually reading something. Am I in good hands? If you have that confidence, and you can earn that confidence, by controlling the questions, by making sure that it's mystery instead of confusion, making sure that it's those questions they feel like questions that the script wants you to ask instead of questions that the script doesn't want you to ask. That if you're that writer, you're ahead.
It's like the script is bringing up questions, not you.
Yeah.
Like, that it's a question you're supposed to be intrigued by. This is a good line from Merlin too. Love the fact that she's a detective but doesn't know what's going on in her own family circle. Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Very true.
There's a line in the script. I don't remember if it's in the show, when they're at the bar and one of her old high school friends is really drunk and says, "You ever see Sherlock? That show?"
Oh yeah, that's what Merlin just brought up too.
Is that in the show itself, or is that just in the script?
I don't know. He said, "Lovely moment where Patty tells Mare how easily Sherlock solves crimes."
Yeah, like you should watch the show. You might get a lead on your on the case that you failed to solve for a year. It's wonderful. When I first saw the episode, one thing I really loved was Mare's confrontation with Dawn, because they set up that not only is Mare unable to solve this missing persons case, but the mother of that missing person, who, by the way, this has a really bit of fun, unique character description, is going through chemo, so we definitely remember her. She puts out a statement saying that how disappointed she is with the police, and if they're not going to find her daughter, everyone else is going to fight to find the daughter. Like they keep her in your mind. They set that up. That could have just been expositional for some later plot point, but they bring her back in this episode and they turn it into a character point where Mare you know, as she's about to get awarded for her big heroic moment from when she peaked in her 20s, or in her teens rather, she's caught up in trying to convince this grieving woman on chemo that, like, you should lay off me. I'm doing my best. And that's the thing that she's hung up on. She just wants people to know that she's doing her best. And Dawn, instead of fighting back and saying, well, you're not doing your best, you're failing, she's just saying, like, I don't want to talk to you right now. Get off me. That particular beat tells us more than just plot. It tells us about both of these characters, who they are at their core.
And it's nice how Mare's the one who kicks off that confrontation. Lori, her friend, I have it pulled up on the screen. It says Lori glances over at Mare. She knows where her mind's at. And then Lori immediately tries to jump in and be like, look, don't do it here. No, like, do it later. And Mare is already over there confronting Dawn, being like, yeah, you were on TV. Like, I wish you would have talked to me first. And it's really great. There's a lot of
choices.
Yeah. It's a really good moment where we get to see something that is, like, really riling her up. And then Merlin said, is her athleticism her superpower? I don't think so, because I think the point of her chasing down Freddy and then twisting her ankle is to show that, like, she's past her superpower era. Like, that's...
The characters over 40 don't have superpowers in stories.
I think, what would her superpower... I guess her superpower is that she, like...
She doesn't let go. It's also...
Yeah.
It's also
like, very,
her,
like, dogged.
She really cares. She really cares. I mean, there's that lovely moment where I think the character's name is Freddy, where after she, you know, essentially arrests Freddy for stealing a bunch of things and, you know, going on the run from her, she sends him off to the shelter and then makes a point of, we got to get the heat in his house back on. You know, like, that she cares about people. She cares about the case. When we meet Siobhan, this writer loves Siobhan so much, where, like, if you watch the show, when you first meet her, you kind of get the sense of, like, okay, so she's rebellious, you know, she has tension with her mom. You see her here, he describes her as the rock of the family, anything but rebellious. After she starts arguing with her mom, there's a line in there where he says she has...
Oh no, we lost
Avi.
Here, text him.
This is where I can go ahead and I pulled it up. So it says that Siobhan is the strongest mooring in this very broken family. Presently, she's sitting on her bed, putting together a recorder while Drew kneels on the floor unpacking the discount aquarium kit. So that's the part Avi was talking about with her. And did anybody else think that she looked a little bit like baby Brie Larson? I just felt that was very important to say.
Oh, there he is.
He's back.
Yeah, sorry about that. I'm doing this off my phone and it just conked out. But I just wanted
no
to
worries.
say, he adds the line there that she has the best qualities of both of her parents, including Mare's I think tenacity. What I think might have been it.
Compassionate, bright, emotionally astute. Siobhan is the strongest mooring in this very broken family.
Okay, but later in the scene, while they're fighting, there's a bit of description, kind of interlude.
Let's see if I can... Oh, here we go. It's a jab. Mare eats it. If she's come for a fight, she's going to get one. Siobhan has the best qualities of her parents, her father's kindness, and her mother's tenacity.
Yeah.
Bam.
So first of all, I just love how clear it is that what the writer thinks about his character here, which, you know, you're not going to really have much control of in the show, and other than just what you have your character say and do, and just hope that the viewers feel the same way about this character as you. But it also tells me a bit about Mare. You know, Mare's best quality is her tenacity.
Yeah. And I didn't particularly get that her father was kind. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's my bias, but that was not my vibe from him. I'm just kind of like, you're a little bit, like, kind of a goober.
Alexie is against positive portrayals of fatherhood in movies.
I am. I'm very much.
It's the casting. I think it's the casting. Because if you don't see the show, you just read the script. The worst thing that he does in this script is wait until the last minute to tell MARE about his engagement. Right. Which there is a scene where he tries to tell her, but she hangs up because she's busy chasing down Freddie. But besides that, he seems kind of innocuous, and there's something about the way that they play him in the show, where he feels a little bit less kind. I'm not sure what it is.
The face of the actor.
Yeah, probably. I didn't like it. Just felt like he was condescending a lot. Like it felt like he was kind of like, "Oh, MARE, you unmarried woman. Like I'm moving on, and you're not." And the fact that he came into her house, I was like, "What are you doing?" Even if she wasn't there, leave her alone. But that's my bias.
Yeah. What's so funny is
Roy from The Office, right?
Yeah. What's particularly funny is that in the script, they don't really give him much of a reason to come to the house, right? Like in the script, he just kind of comes in and says, "Hey, you got any oregano?" In the show, they actually added a reason for him to come in. It's like, I brought Drew's overnight bag. By the way, do you have any oregano?
So someone must have caught it.
But if he came in with just the desire to give oregano, that's somehow, I don't know, more likable.
I wonder if somebody pulled aside the writer and said, "So, by the way, we're supposed to like him, right?" It's like, "Yeah, he's super kind." It's like, but he just barges into the house. It's like, "Well, he wants to borrow oregano." It's like, let's give him more of a reason. I know you like him.
You don't go to your ex. Yeah.
Here's a line from Michelle that I think is interesting. Apparently, they had to rewrite a lot of this show because of COVID, so scenes that would have had a lot of people went down to 2, which probably made it more intimate and strengthened the character. That's true. Interesting.
The party sequence for the engagement party has like nobody there, right? It really is just the close family members and like the band. Oh, because of COVID, they had to reshoot all of the scenes with the Guy Pearce character. They had a different actor originally, and they lost him for scheduling purposes when it came time to continue shooting. So they, Kate Winslet knows Guy Pearce and asked, "Hey, can you do this for us?" So he jumped on the show. They had to reshoot all the scenes they had shot with him already, now with Guy Pearce.
Wow.
What a guy.
That's why Guy Pearce plays this, this guy.
I did think it was like kind of strange that he was there, kind of a minor role. I don't know.
Yeah, it's him helping out a friend. It's not like stunt casting that they would do on like Columbo.
Right.
It's just, here's the guy they could get. He does a good job. He's a generous performer because he's giving those scenes to Kate.
Wait, which character is this?
The
Richard.
Author. Yeah.
The author.
Richard.
Yeah.
I didn't like him. Maybe I just don't like. I don't know. He felt like, I don't know.
Well, he's kind of like a milquetoast guy. I just think it's funny that they got this like megastar to play him, and they just got him because he was available, and he did it as a favor.
Yeah, that's cool of him. I don't know. It was like, I think it was just that it felt like we knew because Kate's performance was so strong that she wasn't ready for whatever he wanted. And so I was like, why are you doing this? Like, can't you pick up the vibe too? She's not ready.
Characters are their choices. Everything that happens with that scene becomes a Kate choice. Like, even like her deciding to leave with him is entirely because she was having a bad day, and then she sees Frank walk in with his buddies, and then that convinces her, like, I want to go out with this guy. And it wouldn't have happened aside from that, which I think kind of it contributes to the idea of he's okay, I guess. Like, he's not like somebody that she needs to go out with, but it makes more sense as, why are we actually doing this for the show? It's not because we're trying to set up this burgeoning romance. It's because Kate has something to get off her chest. She's working through some things, and she's using him to do that. Characters are the choices. That's the thing Cosmo said?
Mm-hmm.
I love Cosmo. He's great.
He is great.
I also think it's just something that's true and people have been saying for a long time too.
It is. It's just so put true. Very succinctly in a way that I'm like, okay, yeah, yes.
There might have been a draft of this where, where she actually just decides to go to, sleep with him because she likes him. And at some point down the line, it's possible they added that little moment of she sees Frank walks in. Like, what are the odds that Frank would walk in? Right? That exists entirely to give her motivation to make a choice.
I think this is a great example. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think this is a great example of making situations, every situation in this type of story should be something that like complicates or makes things worse in some way. Like you want her to be making a choice because of something uncomfortable or something that bothers her. Like if she just hooked up with this guy first or just decided not to date him, it means nothing if it wasn't for the fact that it was her relationship with her ex and how she sees herself. All these things are carried with her in the room. And that choice. Yeah.
Can you see me?
Yeah.
I'm doing John's hand gesture. Raise the stakes. Every scene, every scene they raise the stakes. And they really push it, like you were saying. Like that's exactly what's happening when he comes over to borrow oregano. It's like, okay, how can we make this? How can we raise the stakes? How can we make this scene worse? Like, how can we add more conflict? Because all drama is conflict. To get in another John quote, it's every Johnism. Something that this excels at, I think, is putting people together and heightening the tension, constantly.
Yeah. I mean, that scene where she's chasing Freddy into his house, he cuts himself. She gets backup from a cop, but it's the rookie cop who just joined the force today. And worse than that, he faints at the sight of blood. So he can't really be helpful. So now, she has to, talk Freddy out of there. She talks Freddy out of there. They're walking into the car. Freddy's sister shows up and punches him in the face. Now they have to, pull a fight apart. There's definitely a version you could do where it's just, she follows Freddy into the house and, arrests him, brings him out, and has a little conversation with him. Or you can do the version where everything is a complication. And that's how we learn about Freddy. That's how we learn about death. That's how we learn about that rookie cop. It's all through the stuff that Mare has to go through. She's essentially touring us through these characters in this town. As we are meeting these obstacles, we're making a mental note of, oh, this obstacle's name is Freddy. This obstacle's name is Beth. This obstacle's name is Trammell, or whatever his name was. And we're setting the table without necessarily consciously being aware of the fact that we're setting the table.
Mm-hmm. And that's why it was a little bit tricky to try to do a tent pole, because it's like, it might have even been easier. No, I think it would have been harder if I hadn't seen the whole season, because it's like you don't know yet fully what matters most. Because honestly, it's like all these things matter. Like as far as I remember, there's not necessarily loose ends. Like everything matters. But without getting too spoilery, but everything matters. It's just some things, I guess, matter more to Mare's core story. And
I think it's just Act 1, right? And everything here, because it's important, because it's set up, it's her normal world. And like Avi said, the only goal she has in this is to just get through her day. And maybe
but it's an active goal.
It is an active goal. She's trying to do her job. She's trying to fulfill her obligations. There is still an objective in every scene that makes sense for who she's coming from.
Alexie, I think the thing that you hit on so well in the way that you broke up the breakdown is there are essentially two plots. There's Mare and everybody that she interacts with. I guess you could say there's three. There's Mare, there's everybody that she interacts with. That's Mare. And, Mare is a Trojan horse for introducing us to all of these other characters. There's Erin and her own personal... She has these obstacles in her life, but she wants to go out with this guy she hasn't met. And so that's her big goal. She's the only character who Mare doesn't interact with in this episode. And various people in Erin's story. And I guess to a lesser extent, I'm trying to think if there are any other scenes that don't have either of these characters. And there are a couple of scenes where the anchoring character is Siobhan, where we see Siobhan's friend group through Siobhan's eyes, and we see Frank through Siobhan's eyes. But it was such a choice on the part of the writer of, we are going to tell plots based on who is experiencing them, as opposed to, a more standard protagonist has a goal, antagonist must stop the character. It's like, well, Mare is our eyes, and she is experiencing Betty Carroll. She is experiencing Freddie. She's experiencing Richard. And then meanwhile, Aaron has this situation with her, with her shitty ex and his shitty girlfriend, and her friend who's going to help her prepare for this big date. And there's something to be said for the power of point of view in telling story. Yeah. Whose point of view are we following, and why are we looking at the things that they are looking at in the scene as opposed to skipping to the next?
I agree. I feel like it feels like, well, first off, Mare is 100% the central protagonist. That's just the case, and also the title.
She's the glue.
Yeah, she is it. But it does feel, I agree that Siobhan feels like a very strong favorite of the writer, especially like as things go on, to the point where
he loves Siobhan.
Yeah, he does. Which, I mean, she's a great character, and I would encourage everyone to keep watching it, because I think she's an interesting one to follow. I think, and plus, just a lot of interesting stuff happens. My friend and I were watching this together, and we kept only intending to watch one episode, but sometimes you just can't, because it gets freaking intense. Adam, I'm curious when you finish it, because
yeah, I'll finish it.
It goes places.
It's good. It feels like a crime novel. I feel like there's going to. I feel like this is a limited series.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a limited, and that's why this feels like an act one of a movie as opposed to a fully sort of self-contained episode per se. Like this is setting it up. There's definitely a version of MARE of Easttown where they decide, let's make this a 24 episode a season show, and we'll sort of do a case of the week first episode.
Yeah.
This isn't that.
Yeah, I agree. And it's, if they did do a second season, it would be like not Lady Bird, was it Fleabag, where there was no second season intended, and they're like, well, what else can we possibly, like, what else would this character be dealing with? And then in Fleabag, the answer was her love life. And I don't know what it would be for this. Maybe her love life. But
the rom-com version.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She moves to the big city and becomes becomes a detective there.
It would be a sequel. It wouldn't be a continuation. It would be a sequel.
Yes, exactly.
Treating it like a movie. What's funny is, up until we have like scene missing, and then we see Aaron's body. If you just cut this episode down to only Aaron scenes, there's an entire story there, right? It is an entire plot where she is the protagonist of her story. And I, just thinking in terms of series now, like beyond the first episode, you're trying to make us care about figuring out who killed so-and-so, who died. And key to that is making us care about that character to begin with. It's one thing to be like, somebody is dead and we have to figure out who did it, because that's just the thing that we're supposed to be interested in, the idea of finding a killer. But they make us actually basically fall in love with this character. Like, she has a strong want, she has a strong need, she has a major flaw, and she has all these obstacles. And she gets to be the point of view character of her arc that nobody else gets to. The exception of Siobhan sometimes.
They made a really bold choice there, because it's like this. They made the murder matter because they set her up so that she had things to do. Like, we knew that she still had an arc to go on. Like, she still had an objective. Like, she still had things to do, and then they cut it off. And that is much more compelling and powerful than if she was just there to be a dead body. Like, if she wasn't killed, she had a whole season worth of stuff that she could have done. Like, she was an interesting character, and then they cut it off. And I think that is a really good choice that also, like, sometimes, like, frankly, you're in dangerous territory. We're killing young women. And, like, And that is something that is not taken as seriously as it should be in a lot of shows and like a lot of things. Like there's like killing people left and right, and it's especially young women. And this felt different because it felt like it mattered. You know, it wasn't just like a body to be there.
She was a fully formed character.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be super quick. If you want to make somebody really nervous about the fate of a character, give them closure. If they have closure, then they have nowhere to grow, and suddenly they're disposable. And I think that's part of why her death hits so hard, is because she doesn't have any form of closure. You know, in any other show, you see somebody who has some sort of arc to do, and they actually manage to achieve that arc. You know, your heart's going to start racing because you realize, oh, the show's still going to keep going. Oh no, there's somebody who can now be killed, and it'll be really sad, but also like there's no more story for them. She had a story, and that there's a lesson to be taken from that also. If you really want us to feel the loss of somebody, make them like non-expendable, essentially. Make them somebody who we wish could stay alive and actually possibly could have.
Totally agree. I just think about Grey's Anatomy, right? Like whenever they were going to kill a character, it was like, yeah, they wrapped up their story, they had the arc, they met the kid, whatever. And I totally agree with this theory about like objective is unfulfilled and compelling, and you cut it off. Like I'm thinking back to Game of Thrones. They killed so many characters that felt so pivotal and important, was so physical at the time, earlier seasons. And it was always those characters who had unfinished work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Although on the flip side, make sure that if you're going to take somebody, set them up to have an arc, and then kill them prematurely, make sure their death actually does something to the story, other than just kind of like, you didn't see that coming, did you?
Right. And I feel like Game of Thrones 85% of the time did make it important to the story. At least from my memory.
Usually. I would recommend, it reminds me of the show On My Block, which is a fabulous show. Would highly recommend. But they do a really good job of having consequences for things that happen, and also like making you emotionally invested. It's like one of the best handled things I've ever seen, and I have not seen enough people talking about this show. So
what's it called?
On My Block. It's about like a bunch of teenagers in like a rough, like a tough Los Angeles neighborhood. But it's got like a lot of comedy and like a lot of heart, but like they do not shy away from anything at all. And I think it's really, really well done, and I wish more people talked about it. That's my opinion. Yep.
You know, there's an episode of, is this a cartoon from some of the Rick and Morty people called Solar Opposites? That's basically an animated sitcom of a family of aliens, but it's like bizarrely violent. And there's this one episode where the characters realize that they're all going to die by the end of the day, and they hadn't really quite grasped the fact that death is final. And now that they realize death is final, they realize, oh, but none of us are fulfilled. And the whole episode is they have to get closure before they die, so that they can die without, having regrets. And I feel like that is sort of, we see the sort of the reverse of that on TV all the time, of like, so this character has closure. Oh no, but they're still alive. What am I going to do with them now? And that can also be an interesting driver for plot, because now you have to sort of reinvent your character.
That was my complaint about the 100 or the 100, which I watched far too many seasons of.
Same.
But there was like a few instances where they just killed characters. And you're like, what are you doing? Like, why? Like, what have you done? And like, sometimes it was because the actor had to leave. And like, that's like one of the most annoying feelings in the world, is like when you're watching a character and they die, and then you're like, I bet that actor had another job, because that made no sense whatsoever, and like did not fit and did not matter. Like, it wasn't even that it was like surprising. It's just like that actor clearly had another obligation or an issue going on, because there's no way. And that happened a few times on. And
then their closure
100.
is rushed.
Yeah.
It's like, we have one episode to figure this out.
Do you remember that episode of House where Cal Penn like died, or he left the show, and then and then they had like this weird episode after, like, oh, did you hear the news? He killed himself. And then they made the whole episode about like how, mental illness and like characters, like you don't know what their emotional state is, and they're trying to spin it, but it felt so weird and jarring because he was like such a great character on the show.
Was it just that he had to leave?
Yeah, he left. He left the show.
Yeah,
he left the show, and then they had to like be like, oh fuck.
Yeah, so and these changes where that sometimes are driven by practical problems like an actor wanting to leave or you have to reshoot because of COVID and you can't get everybody back and so on and so forth. Like those are just the realities of the business too. And I think that if you want to be a screenwriter, those are also things you have to become aware of. That sometimes your script is going to become something that it wasn't meant to become because that was the only way for it to get made. It's super interesting watching that happen on various productions of this read so great on the page. What happened? Well, we had some availability issues and this actor was
Passengers.
That's definitely an example. That is definitely a specific notorious example of a script that was renowned. It was a blacklist script, and then it got made, and then in the process of getting made, different people had different opinions of what should happen, and then various stars came on, and then they wanted things, and people brought in money, and the people who brought in money wanted things, and you just sort of have to roll with it. Like, it is impressive that this pilot is as good as it is, and is probably significantly better than the original draft of it. And then if you look at the title page, you see just how many revisions it went through. That can be so corrosive. That can really destroy what you have. And that's just kind of expected. You start off with something as brilliant as you can make it and just sort of assume it's going to get tarnished over time because that's what goes.
Because this is just like, this could mean that a lot of people had their hands on it with a lot of different opinions, a lot of different producer notes, a lot of different just like people wanted to poke it for the sake of poking it. So yeah, you're absolutely right that it's pretty amazing that this came out the way that it did. And like, honestly, that they left us those moments where characters got their like random lines, like where, we kept a lot of things that could have easily been cut. And I'm glad we didn't.
And I think this is like the big difference between HBO as a company and like Netflix as a company, or just like one of the traditional studios. Like HBO has historically had like producers who cared more about like, whatever vision means, than maybe some other streaming platforms that are more like, well, this is 3 seasons, right? We need to make X decision based on marketing factor, and like there are a lot of great scripts that go into Netflix that turn into very mediocre things.
Yeah, I mean, I can't speak to who runs which company, but I will say that in TV, the writer has more power than they do in features. So like here, it's entirely, like the studio is going to have notes, the company's going to have notes, but they're probably going to be a little bit more on the creative side. You're not going to bring in directors who are going to rewrite you completely, this show is directed by one director who actually came in to replace a different director. But he directed every episode, and he probably had a lot of creative input and made a lot of decisions to, adjust scenes and adjust characters and whatnot. But at the end of the day, he needed the approval of the writer. You don't need that approval in a movie at all.
To be clear for anyone who's not sure, what we mean by writer is not the like writer's room in TV. It's the showrunner. The showrunner is king. People in the writer's room matter, but they they're completely like just there for the showrunner to.
I believe there was no writer's room for this show, though.
Yeah,
no, this
I don't
one
think
in
so.
particular.
I just mean in general. Yeah, I just mean in general that's like when people say in TV writers are king, they're referring to showrunners, just so people know who is like the person in charge of the writer's room. And
to sort of rephrase, under the producer, because the producer is always going to, in studio heads and whatnot are always going to have the most power, and they're always going to, TV does hit a lot of obstacles when it comes to the translation screen. the powerful person underneath all that is going to be the showrunner as opposed to the director. The director's a guest on a TV show, even on a show where they are the director of every episode. As far as I understand, I'm sure somebody more seasoned could tell me otherwise. But on a series, the director is trying to execute the writer's vision, and in a feature, the writer creates a script and then lets go of it. And then the director comes in, and maybe they're going to want to do your version of things. Maybe they have their own ideas, and they're going to do something completely different. And ultimately, you've done your part. So it's an interesting difference. But I'm just looking at the number of revisions, and if I see that number of revisions on a feature, my assumption is never, oh, this got better.
No, it's they had to bring in tons of people to try to fix this thing, probably, right? Because like, you get written out usually.
Well, yeah, I mean, but then you're adding names also to the written.
True. So unfortunately, we are coming up on the end of our time. So I wanted to tell everyone about next week. Next week, we are doing our first musical, In the Heights.
Oh, woohoo.
So that is going to be fun. And I hope that everyone can make it. And we have locked our guest for the last week of this month. And he's going to come on to talk to us about writing for interactive media. So, like those Netflix shows where you get to like choose your own adventures type shows, and also like games, just kind of like that in-between space between games and TV or film. So it's going to be fun.
It's exciting.
Very cool.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Avi, for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Adios.